Hello, my most amazing scholars of truth, goodness, and beauty. How are you today? 4G scholars, we are in the middle of working on an art project that is reminding us of the history lessons that you learned about the Civil War. So we're doing that portrait of Abraham Lincoln. And in class or on the project video, we will work on drawing the face of Abraham Lincoln. But today, for the art history video, I want to focus on a piece of artwork that is dedicated to an important part of the Civil War. The idea that during the Civil War, that was the first time in America's history that there was an all-black regiment of soldiers. And there is a memorial in Boston that is giving honor to that group of men. So here's the picture I want to show you. This is a relief sculpture. In other words, it has some three-dimensional qualities, but it's not the kind of sculpture that is completely like a statue that you can walk all the way around. It is flat on a wall, but then these figures come out of the wall, so there's a three-dimensional quality to them. So this is called the Shaw Memorial. It is there to give honor to the leader of the regiment. His name was Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. He was actually a white colonel, but he was in charge of an entire infantry full of black soldiers. And so you can see that Colonel Shaw is sitting on the horse, and then the men who are marching along here, those are the African American soldiers that were in his regiment. Now, the thing that I also want to have you notice is that there is a figure above the heads of the men. And in this picture, it's kind of hard to see the whole thing, but that's an angel. So like an angel is kind of watching over them. And then the other thing I wanted you to notice, that's a kind of an artistic thing, is what do you notice about how the men are all lined up? Look at their legs and look at how they are placed. Does it look like they are in marching formation? I think it's really interesting that even though this, of course, is a sculpture that doesn't move, you can really get a sense of movement from how the artist used the perspective of kind of lining them up and having marching legs to show us that this would have been a scene where they were moving. I'm going to show you a really short video that kind of gives us a look at this memorial in a bigger perspective so we can kind of see what it looks like on the street where it's located, and if you happen to be a tourist in Boston, what that would feel like a little bit more. All right, let's take a look.
I'm Greg Cook from WBR's Artery, and we're here at the Robert Gould Shaw Memorial. And one of the things that's so moving about it is just where it is. Massachusetts was one of the hotbeds of the abolitionist movement in the 19th century that led to the Civil War and the end of slavery in this country. And when they put up this monument 30 years later, one of the things they wanted to symbolize was how much they were still dedicated to that cause of equality. And so they put it right here on the corner of the Common, one of the most valuable and monumental places of real estate in the city, and right across the street from the State House. And it sort of acts as a broadside to the State House that we're still committed to this cause. The sculptor was August St. Gaudens, who worked on it for almost a decade and a half. He was one of the most recognized and revered sculptors of his era. And one of the things he did is he spent a long time working with African-American models to get a real sensitive portrayal, to make the people feel like real people and individuals in the statue. When it was dedicated in 1897, one of the speakers was the great African-American civil rights leader, Booker T. Washington. And he said that the point of this monument is equal opportunity for African Americans in this country. And he said, until that time comes, this monument will stand for effort, not victory complete.
These are soldiers going off to fight in a war. A drummer leads the march. Who is their leader? The The man on the horse is colonel of the regiment. He too is in uniform and carries a sword. Look at his horse, whose tail switches and head and neck strain against the reins. Now, move around the sculpture and study the soldiers' faces. Some look young, others older. Some have beards, while others are clean-shaven. How would you describe their expressions? Serious? Scared? Determined? Hopeful? Proud? Sad? This sculpture memorializes a real event in American history. It shows Colonel Shaw and his regiment as they marched off on May 28, 1863, to fight in the American Civil War. These brave soldiers were members of the Massachusetts 54th Regiment. 1,000 African American men volunteered to join this regiment to fight against slavery. Their leader was Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, a young white man from Boston whose parents were abolitionists. What happened to these men? The 54th Regiment traveled from Boston to lead an attack against one of the forts protecting Charleston, South Carolina. Sadly, almost half of the soldiers who stormed the fort were killed, captured, or died later from their wounds. Colonel Shaw was also killed. The bravery and determination of the 54th Regiment earned great respect and inspired other African Americans to join the Union Army, eventually contributing to victory for the pro-Union states. Artists pay tribute to history by creating memorials. A memorial keeps the memory of a person or event alive. This memorial to Robert Gould Shaw and his regiment was designed by the American artist Augustus St. Gaudens. St. Gaudens wanted this monument to be as realistic as possible. The figures are life-size. He hired African Americans to pose for him. He used a photograph of Colonel Shaw in order to capture his facial features and uniform accurately. He even brought a horse into his New York studio so he could work from a live model. This sculpture is made of plaster and painted gold. You can see a bronze version of this sculpture today in Boston on Beacon Street, and another example at St. Gaudens' home, Aspet, in Cornish, New Hampshire, now a National Historic Site.
One of the things that I love about art is that sometimes it's used to pay tribute or pay a memorial to someone or some event that we respect or that we want to remember for generations to come. The idea that a sculptor can create something that helps people remember the sacrifices that were made, I think that's really important. And so studying the Shaw Memorial has reminded me that I should be thankful every day for the sacrifices that people made to try to bring our country through a war like the Civil War, and that it was a step in the direction of freedom for so many people. So I'm glad that we were able to share this time looking at a memorial from the Civil War, and I hope that you think about some of the things you're thankful for that people have sacrificed in the past as we continue to work through our art project about Abraham Lincoln. All right, thanks for checking out the art history video. I'll see you next time.